Hello and welcome to part 2 of my Eminem album rankings video. So just to recap, we've done 5 out of the 10 albums thus far. So we are now looking at the next 5 in our list. And at number 5, we are going with Relapse. You see, this is the refill version with the extra tracks onto it, which we'll get to. So, originally released May 9th, 2009, May 19th, 2000. I think that's what I was getting it from. So this is the first album back after Eminem's extended break due to his drug dependency and other things affecting his life around that time as well, which enabled more of the drug dependency. That's why the cover quite cleverly has Eminem's face made out of pills. There's only one of the M's had some good album covers before, but that's certainly one of the better ones, is in terms of the creativity of it. So a lot of the basic. I know that this album was kind of a way to re-establish M as a lyricist after his hiatus and after Encore, which wasn't as well received, particularly lyrically, wasn't as well received as some of his earlier material. So there's certainly an element of harking back to the earlier days, kind of Slim Shady, Marshall Mathers LP kind of style on here. One of the notable things about the album is that M delivers a lot of the material in quite a high pitched voice, even higher than he generally goes on his tracks, which did put people off somewhat before. And I mean, certainly I was a little bit taken aback at first. I thought it would work for the comedic tracks, but maybe not necessarily for the more serious material. But considering pretty much everything on this album, bar one or two notable tracks, are comedic or demented, the higher range does kind of work, and it's not so noticeable once you get accustomed, more attuned to hearing it, and also his voice, experimenting with his voice to go into different accents almost. So is it a bit strange hearing M's voice suddenly go Swedish or Geordie? I mean, yeah, but again, it's only a few really notable times, and I say they're on more comedic songs anyway, so it doesn't really matter so much. Certainly in terms of lyrics themselves, you can definitely hear M really trying to get back into the multi-syllable rhyme schemes that he'd been quite well known for. And a lot of the songs, the bars the verses are fairly concise as well, not falling into the pitfalls of some of the later material where very few of the verses go over 16 bars, so they don't outstay their welcome or anything. Also notable is that the vast majority of the album is produced by Dr. Dre and his producers, which the most amount of Dr. Dre production you ever get on an Eminem album. So while some of the beats may get a little bit samey due to this, certainly they're a lot more thumping overall than M's albums have been in his discography. And also Drake does switch it up a fair bit. There are certainly tracks on here which sound more akin to a general Eminem style of production. So at least he branches out a little bit in terms of the production. So yeah, we begin with a nice opening skit with Dominic West guest starring as Doctor West, playing the Doctor, sort of releasing Eminem into the wild. It kind of then turns into a nightmare about M's dependency and about the Slim Shady ego retaking him over. Then leading into 3 a.m. Again, one of the quite horrorcore influenced tracks. So a nice eerie way to start off the album, kind of sets the pace, set the tone for a lot of what is to follow. My Mum, a more comedic look on his drug use and where it all stemmed from, and his relationship with his mother to an extent, with some comedic lines in there to bring in the comedic side of the album. So we've already kind of balanced it out between like the demented side and the more farcical side of them. Then we kind of get a little bit of mix of the two with Insane, another one of his stepdad tracks. Again, I'm not sure if it's supposed to be the same stepdad or whatever. I mean, obviously the track itself is very, very fantasized. I mean, what there may be elements that could be realistic, or there's certainly a lot that's just overinflated for the sake of making it an insane song. And again, over the sort of haunting Dre beats as well, it kind of really works. And yeah, there's some great effects in there that M plays with his own voice, going back between a sort of him and his mother and his stepdad as well. So yeah, a very entertaining song overall, if perhaps not the easiest to listen to from time to time. Bagpipes from Baghdad. The beat takes a bit more of a worldly view, hence the title, having more of a Middle Eastern and Scottish influence to it. There's not a lot about the song that M hasn't already kind of been established in the previous sections, apart from his feud with Mariah Carey and Nick Cannon at this time, and experimenting with the sounds of his voice as well. Yeah, it's probably one of the weaker tracks overall, though, and it's one of the ones that quite often gets mentioned in terms, for people who aren't a fan of this album. It's kind of like a pivotal track of showcasing what's weak about the album, and to an extent, I can understand that. It's not a bad song, particularly. It's just not. There's a lot of tracks on here which are stronger than it. It's kind of meshed between a lot of stronger tracks. Hello, which is a bit of a return song, quite a minimalistic beat. So for a bit of a return and explaining a little bit about his absence and his drug misuse, it works well, and bridges in to the Tonya skit, which then bridges into Same Song and Dance, which is again one of the serial killer-esque tracks, each verse dedicated to a particular woman. The first being the fictional Tonya character, then Lindsay Lohan, then Britney Spears. And in terms of sort of the demented fantasy kind of storytelling aspects of it, it works well, and it kind of plays out as a bit of an eerie dance track as well with the song and dance title. Yeah, it works well. We Made You, the lead single, which kind of expands on the mentioning of various celebrities from around that time and even before the time, because M certainly has his celebrities that he likes to mention, particularly in the female celebrities. It's got a bit of a rapid fire flow in certain parts as well, not necessarily speed rapping that is used a lot more later on, but it's certainly more pacey than a lot of the tracks we've had up until this point. Um, for a lead single, it's catchy and fun, so it works. Um, Medicine Ball, yeah, is a bit kind of there in terms of tracks. Yeah, again, it's not one of the stronger ones. It's kind of just uh, builds on from a lot of the stuff that's already been looked at. So it's just kind of a bit there. Then Stay Wide Awake, which is probably the most harrowing of these serial killer style tracks. And again, there's the production of it. Dre produced again, but it does really feel like quite closer to a haunting Eminem style song. So this is really where Dre's production comes really in handy in sort of helping elevate the style of the lyrics. Yeah, certainly one of the highlight tracks, particularly in terms of that style of song on here, which we then follow with Old Time's Sake with Dr. Dre. Not one of their stronger collaborations, particularly when we get into the refill section of this. But as a way to get Dre on the album, I suppose it's fine. Rekindle their chemistry together. Must Be the Ganja again is a little bit kind of there in terms of we've already had a lot of these styles of songs that are starting to get a little bit tiresome at this time, but it does also kind of bring back the actual drug use which affected them and leading into the Mr. Mavis skits, where he's found after his overdose, and then Deja Vu, which more explicitly details his actual drug use and what happened leading up to his overdose, which almost took his life. So for using that, for being able to describe that, even though there are probably songs where it's done better that we'll get onto, it's certainly one of the stronger tracks. This section kind of builds up a little bit more towards the end of the album. Beautiful. The soul Eminem production on here comes from an older track, is then remade for the purpose of this album. So it kind of comes from a time during his drug use where he was feeling quite emotional and depressed. So being able to get that emotion onto the album is nice to be able to hear that side of him as well in comparison to a lot of the other material we've had up until this point. The final verse kind of goes into a bit more of an uplifting. It's a newer verse that kind of goes for a bit more of an uplifting style to finish the song off with. It's a nice song overall. It works. Saying that. Then Crack a Bottle featuring Dr. Dre and 50 Cent. Again, just a kind of way to get all three of them on a track together. The song came out before it leaked before any of the other Relapse material did, and people kind of took to it because it was a new Eminem release. It was originally written as a Dre ghostwriting track, which then became the three of them all together. It did just kind of get thrown onto the album so it could have a home. Because I mean, 50's album came out a lot later, and this probably wouldn't have fit on there. And obviously, Dre's album came out a lot later than this, and it certainly wouldn't have fit on there. So again, as a way of housing this song, it's fine, but it's not one of their better collaborations altogether. Then we get a classic Steve Berman skit. It's the final of the Steve Berman skits. He hasn't appeared again thus far, but a nice way of kind of harkening back to that character to bring back from the skits that have been on the previous albums. Those skits always work really well. M and Steve Berman have very good rapport with each other in these skits. Then leading on to the final track, Underground. Again, just a way of ending the album with the very hardcore, horrorcore-ish kind of style. And also for this track, M does kind of lose the high-pitched nature of the high-pitched tones of his voice, like he does on Beautiful. So at least towards the album, we get, if you aren't so much a fan of that vocal style, we do kind of lose it towards the end anyway. So that's fine. But yeah, M does sound really like sort of classical, hardcore Eminem at the end of this track to finish off. Dr. West comes back along with Ken Kniff to finish off as well with another classic Eminem skit character. Again, the refill edition of this, which came out later, we get the song Forever, the collaboration with Drake, Kanye West, Lil Wayne, and Eminem, where M was able to really establish himself alongside his peers at that time. So for that, it really works as a song, and a really great way of helping re-establish Eminem again. Hell Breaks Loose with Dr. Dre, which is a much better collaboration between the pair of them than Old Time's Sake. The beat's better, their flows are better, their rhymes are better. I do kind of feel this should have made the album rather than Old Time's Sake. I'm sure they had their reasons for why they did it this way around, but this is a much better track. Follow up with Buffalo Bill, one of the more serial killer style songs, which considering the amount that were already on the album, this probably wouldn't have fit on there. But M does this style really well on this album, so it's cool to hear it. Elevator, a more amusing take on his life and fame and how it's all been affecting him at that time. It's a cool song as well. Take On My Ball, one of the more juvenile tracks. It doesn't quite work as well as some of the similar style songs, but it's fine for being there, I suppose. Music Box, in the vein of Same Song and Dance, Stay Wide Awake, those style tracks again. It has a really haunting beat which helps carry along. M's rhymes are really well placed on here. It probably wouldn't have fit on the album with the amount of those styles of songs that are already on there, but as a bonus track it works really well. And Drop the Bomb on Them, which is a fine bars song to end off this segment of it. There is also a couple of bonus tracks which aren't on the refill version but are on the sort of full deluxe version of the album. My Darling, which is kind of an extended conversation between Eminem and the Slim Shady alter ego trying to take him over again, which works really well as a track. as a bonus song. Again, it may not have fitted with the actual album, but as a bonus track, it works very well. And Careful What You Wish For, trying to again just looks more at M's life, kind of leading up to the overdose and the things that had affected him around that time. The dependency on his drug causing him to cancel his tours. Obi Trice being shot, Proof being shot and not making it, passing away, his relationship with his wife, just all that coming together in a really cool montage opening. Also, a nice little reference about the reception of his albums, how Encore didn't get received as well as his previous albums did, and how in later time it probably would be reevaluated to be a classic, which I would personally say sort of. There's definitely good tracks on Encore, even if it's not necessarily a classic album. But certainly Relapse as a full album, as with Refill as well. It's a nice way of kind of going back to the older style Eminem in a similar way that Music Being Murdered By kind of does. The lyrics are really great on here. The production is really good. So, this is overall, if you get past the certain tropes of it, it's a really strong album. Then followed up with number 4, Recovery, as a sort of sister album to Relapse in a way, released the following year. This looks at more of the emotional tracks rather than just focusing on the lyricism. Not that M's lyricism is necessarily affected too much on here. It kind of does start to delve into a bit more of the punchline style of raps, which were starting to dominate at this time, which has its benefits and disadvantages. But for the most part, M carries it off really well, and the lyrics are generally really strong throughout the album. Also, in terms of production, we get a bit more of a variety of producers. Dre only produces one track on the album. M himself, that is more of a co-producer for tracks rather than actually producing any songs. Production comes from the likes of Just Blaze, Boy Wonder, Alex the Kids, DJ Khalil. Just Blaze and DJ Khalil kind of take on a lot of the production on this album. Several of the tracks are produced by them, which kind of, particularly in Khalil's production, kind of lends more to a rock style for a lot of the production. Not necessarily say that all the tracks become a rock influence, and I'm not necessarily to say this is a rock influence album, but obviously there's a lot of that in terms of the production scattered throughout it. In terms of the actual content, Cold Wind Blows is just kind of a general Eminem bars track in the style of the more aggressive, as a strong way to start off the album and prove that he hasn't gone soft, or considering how emotional a lot of the album will get, is a nice way to retain the more harsher hardcore style of M. Talking to Myself featuring Kobe, looked into more. We start getting more into the personal side, looking at his how his drug dependency was affecting his work ethic, how he wanted to try and make songs during his hiatus, attack certain artists who were big at the time, just more because of his jealousy of those artists being successful, which is strong of him to admit. Yeah, very strong personal track. On Fire, produced by Mr. Porter. Another just bars song is fine, but it's probably one of the weak isn't one of the weaker tracks on here, particularly with it being sandwiched between two very strong tracks. Won't Back Down featuring Pink. Great to have M and Pink collaborating for the first time. A bit late in this terms of their respective careers. If the collaborations had been, what 2002 kind of time, I think though they would have been really really strong as a unit. But it's still great to have them together. Pink sounds really strong on the chorus. The beat is really knocking, and M has some great bars throughout it. Some not so great, but at least there's enough strong material on here to pass through that. It's a great bit towards the end where he plays with his vocals, turning them down and turning them back up, like being in a car. And there's a punchline about being turned up while his song's being played in the car, which I actually haven't tried at any point, but I do really want to give that a go at some time. Um, Following with White Trash Party, more of a party track. So again, not necessarily one of the stronger tracks, but as a catchy party song, it works well, and there are some good bars in there. Going through changes, similar to Deja Vu, looking at the events which led up to his drug overdose and how he's able to eventually pull through the overdose with a nice Ozzy Osbourne sample for the chorus. Emil's production is really emotional throughout this track, which is, I say it's probably the most emotional track on the album. So yeah, it really feels powerful, and so in terms of the content, yeah, it perhaps delves into the what happened in terms of his drug overdose a bit better perhaps than Deja Vu, so a lot more emotionally than Deja Vu. But having both sides of the coin does kind of help each track. But yeah, this is definitely one of the stronger tracks overall. Really, difficult for me. I find quite tricky to get through from times, without feeling too emotional. Not Afraid, the lead single, as a kind of a really strong comeback song, very different to a lot of Eminem's first singles, which is a nice change of pace. Um, and to hear, again, hear him coming, how he's managed to come back through his struggles, and how people, he wants to, inspire people to do the same if they're going through anything similar. So yeah, really strong lead single. Seduction, nice kind of metaphorical kind of track about music and women and that kind of thing, and it's kind of similar to some of the other tracks we get a bit later on in this section of the album. But M does sound smooth and cocky throughout this track, which it helps it carry it, like it's the right kind of necessary amount of swagger, I suppose, for this track. So yeah, that works well. Um, yes, No Love featuring Lil Wayne is next. Another Just Blaze production. Again, to get one of basically the biggest artist at that time in terms of hip hop on Eminem's album for the first collaboration together. It's cool. Wayne sounds really good on here. The Just Blaze production really helps power both their verses along. Of course, Eminem's verse is longer and has more to it to kind of to establish that it's his song. Um, but yeah, they both have really good verses. The chemistry works well together. Wayne doesn't feel particularly out of place on the album, considering he's the only guest rapper on here. He makes perfect use of his placement on there. So yeah, great collaboration between the pair. Spacebound, produced by Jim Johnson. Now, again, this is quite a emotional track as well. Look, kind of establishing a relationship between M and a woman. It's never really been quite established whether it is actually about a woman or if it's more of a metaphor for his drug dependency. You can see it as both. I feel like the video for it does kind of does kind of hint at it being a woman, but again, I don't know if that's. I'm still not sure if that is supposed to be more of a representation rather than reality. Still, either way, this is a very very strong track. The chorus, the high pitched delivery chorus, really brings it along strongly. M sounds great throughout it. Like towards the end, where the beat kind of dips out a bit to allow M to kind of go in and out with his vocals, have them on their own, and then double them to give it quite an emphatic feeling to the end. Yeah, really really strong song. Cinderella Man for this. Is a nice again looking at his life at that time and the things that have happened. I don't feel it's quite as strong as some of the other songs which delve with this kind of material, but it's fine for what it is. 25 to Life, again, very, very heavily a metaphorical track about M's relationship with hip hop music and to an extent as well as the fan base. It's, not necessarily one of the stronger tracks lyrically or anything, but it's a nice metaphor. So Bad, the Dr. Dre produced track, was another one of the more women orientated tracks, but it's very bouncy and catchy, and isn't, in terms of his women's songs, he's not too he's not too mean or too overly emotional or anything on it. He has a nice kind of just catchiness to what he's saying without getting too emotional in either way, so that helps it along as well. Almost Famous, a way of looking at an early Eminem before he kind of blew up and became the Eminem that he is now, with some great punchlines in there. Then Love the Way You Lie, the biggest song from the album, featuring Rihanna, looking at relationships, kind of the more abusive sides and the anger between partners. Again, this is when it was first revealed it was going to be Eminem and Rihanna. It's the first time really that Emma had this kind of collaboration. When you say with like the Pink collaboration as well, making this feel like more of a pop orientated album. Again, Rihanna and M they do kind of work together. It doesn't feel as strong as like some of the other artists that Emma's worked with, that kind of feel a bit more the chemistry kind of feels a bit more strong. But I mean, Rihanna's chorus is fine on here. M's verses, do what they're supposed to, and even again, it's not necessarily one of the stronger overall songs, but as a way of getting ready to close the album, having a big song towards the end, it's fine. It also helps establish Alex the Kid as a producer with similar sounding songs, but he does do them well. You're Never Over. Just Blaze produced tributes to Proof, so at least we did end up getting making a tribute to his fallen best friend. So it's great to be able to get again that kind of emotional track towards the end of the album, and he does do the tribute justice. Then we finish off with the Untitled closing track, produced by Havoc of Mobb Deep, with a nice producer to get on there. Again, this is just a little a bars outro track, basically, just so he can end the album like that, as he is want to do. So for that as an outro, it's kind of fine. I think this version as well, is it this, or is it just the digital version which has the bonus tracks? The Dre produced Riders, which is fine, and the Session 1 track was kind of the introduction of his relationship with Slaughterhouse, minus Joe Budden. But yeah, I mean, all the four of them together work really well, so it's a great way to establish their relationship, and as a bonus cut, it works well. So yeah, in terms of the overall content, it's stronger than Relapse, but I do feel you kind of need the both of them together, so you can kind of get both sides of Eminem. I do, the more emotional, personal side of Eminem does generally weigh out over the more horrorcore, drug influence style of But having said that, Relapse is still a very strong album. Recovery just pips it by having more emotional weight to it, and just some better constructed songs overall. But yeah, they're both really strong together, I feel. So now we get into our top three, and it was fairly obvious what the top three albums were going to be, but in what order? Well, first, number 3, we have the studio debut, Slim Shady LP, released at the end of the 90s. First was a release on Aftermath, and yeah, the proper introduction to Eminem for most of the audience. And yeah, as a way of introducing that early Eminem style, works really well. The Dr. Dre produced My Name Is as a lead single is a classic. Guilty Conscience following that, with the Dre and M playing the sort of the angel and the devil of people in various situations. A really strong collaboration between the pair of them. Definitely one of their strongest songs together, and one of the strongest songs on here in terms of a concept as well. Brain Damage, looking at his childhood, his school life, and the issues they had with bullies, again in more of a comedic way, but there's certainly some real stuff on there, so it's good to have Eminem kind of take real things and make them more make them entertaining for the sake of the track, and the lyrics throughout are great on here. If I had a more sort of general look at his outlook at this kind of time in life, and how he feels about particular situations in his life and in the world around him. We've got a nice smooth way of kind of coming down a bit from some of the earlier material. and it's a bit of a break to some of the material we get later on, with 97 Bonnie and Clyde coming next. A story about Eminem and his daughter Haley, very young daughter Haley, uh, disposing of Kim's dead body in the ocean, in the sea. I mean, a body of water. I mean, I was trying to work out where you get to the ocean from Detroit. I'm believing that's the song does take place in Detroit. My geography is not so great in terms of that, but regardless, it's a story about Eminem has killed his wife and is getting rid of the body whilst talking to Haley in quite a babyish way due to being so young, and you're actually having some vocal samples of Haley throughout the track is cool. Obviously the content you do have to take with a few grains of salt, particularly when you look at some of the other material that M has recorded about Kim and their actual relationship in real life. But again, as a concept, it's certainly very different to what a lot of our artists were doing, and it works well for the context of the album. Particularly when you have the cover, which relates to the song. Role Model, more of a general bars track over quite a minimalist Dre beat. And Eminem, it's just kind of really, this is where M is kind of strongest in terms of like the punchline lyrics he was doing around this kind of time, and more of the kind of zany hardcore style. So yeah, some great long verses, some good memorable punchlines and lines, verses in some bars, memorable bars in there. Yeah, this is only one of the stronger tracks coming around the halfway point. My Fault, following after the Lounge skit, which is a story about M and a fictional woman at a party. She takes too many drugs and having to deal with that. So again, in terms of one of M's storytelling tracks, is really strong, and be able to play all the different characters in the story, and all the different sound effects to help aid the story along as well. And considering how comedic the song is kind of delivered, it does get very heavy towards the end of it, and M's performance in the final in the outro of the song certainly works with that as well. We get the first appearance of Ken Kniff after this in a skit. The only time that Ken Kniff wasn't actually played by M, the character was kind of then taken from another artist after this for M to use by himself. But I mean, M does do the Ken Kniff character really well, so there's that. Come On Everybody, nice bouncy dance track in a way. One of his collaborations with Dinah Ray. See similar styles in the subsequent albums that we were looking at. Very strong party track with some good lyrics to it. Rock Bottom, one of the kind of emotionally heavier songs, probably the most emotionally heavy track on the album, really going in on how low he felt his life was before around this kind of time, in terms of not really having enough to be able to provide for his family, and the fact that he still has a really, really strong rhyme scheme throughout this song really helps it along as well. Quite a haunting beat behind it as well. This is definitely one of the stronger tracks Perhaps the strongest overall track on this album. It's just so beautifully done. Just Don't Give a Fuck. Technically, the first single from the album because it's like the underground introductory track. Coming from the Slim Shady EP before this, which also If I Had and Nice and Bonnie and Clyde appeared on as well, but that's another matter. But yeah, in terms of an introductory track, with M's particular style of rhymes and content, it's a nice strong introductory track. Maybe not as commercially viable as My Name is, but still strong overall. The soap skit is amusing. As the world turns, starts to get a little bit too heavy with the zany hardcore style. Like the chorus is really strong on this. It's a shame that the verses themselves are just but essentially a tale of Eminem getting revenge on a woman, a large lady that said bad things about him by finding her and raping her. Yeah, it's. I mean, I suppose by having it towards the end of the album, there's been already. We've already had a lot of material like this, but not quite as strong as this. But yeah, other than the chorus, there's not a lot that's really redeemable about this track. I mean, M does try and make it comedic with some of his lines, but it's just like the subject going that far doesn't quite warrant how comedic we're supposed to take this song. But this was young Eminem style, so this we had to deal with a lot of the time. I'm Shady, a better, smoother, just kind of just a general bars track as well, but using a kind of take of the Pusher Man, the Curtis Mayfield Pusher Man song for the chorus helps along as well. Bad Meets Evil, the first a proper on CD collaboration between M and Royce the 5'9", really cool to hear. So with the kind of old western theme to it as well. Both M and Royce have great bars back and forth between each other on here. Really good for helping us towards the end of the album where we finish with Still Don't Give a Fuck. Kind of playing off the rest of the similar Slim Shady style songs such as Just Don't Give a Fuck. As a way of kind of ending it quite emphatically with the intro about being scared of death and this kind of thing. As a way of ending the album off, it works fine as it bridges off from Bad Meets Evil. The lyrics may not necessarily be the strongest out of some of the stuff we've already had on the album, but the chorus is a good end to the album overall. So as a way of establishing the old Slim Shady style, the album definitely is a classic. Some of the material again hasn't aged as well, but there's still really strong stuff on here which is absolutely timeless. So for all that, a classic album. Followed up with number 2, Marshall Mathers LP. That's the cover for this one, kind of sort of special 2-disc edition. It was kind of a bit of a coin toss somewhat between these two, as they are both really strong in certain aspects and a bit tricky in other aspects. Of course, Marshall Mathers LP is the album which really solidified as as a main attraction. Um, Obviously, a lot of the material is quite dark and harrowing at times, so it's not always an easy listen. And certainly, as we go through, you will see how uneasy it can be to listen to at times. But right from the beginning with "Kill You," the amounts of rhymes about murder, misogyny, homophobia, it all just kind of comes out right from the beginning. Which, as a way for M to just like establish that this is what we are going to be getting throughout a lot of the album, and as a kind of way of establishing himself as the as the unpleasant character that everyone will just kind of end up accepting and taking as because he's become a successful star. It does make sense. There are even with some of the problematic lines in here, there are quite a few clever moments. Looking at how he'll be accepted. His line about his comedic line about raping his mother, and we gave him the Rolling Stone cover to this person is actually works quite well as a very darkly humorous satire on how popular he can become no matter what he says. Throughout this album, we do get a lot of controversy for controversy's sake, but again, as an early way of establishing himself, it does kind of make sense, and the rhymes are really strong throughout the track. We get a lot of great playing words and sounds off of each other, which really establishes M as a lyricist and as a clever lyricist. We follow this up with Stan, a very a bit of a shocking transition to get from such a heavily violent track into this calmer song, even though it does have this violent nature towards the end of it. It is really interesting that we get just the contrast between the two songs, which I guess helps the album along quite well. Stan featuring the Dido chorus from Thank You, which has really been twisted on its head to match the nature of the material which Eminem as Stan goes through whilst he's writing his letters to Eminem. The very minimalist production, which helps carry the verses along, it doesn't detract too much at all. The use of the writing sound effects, and later on the car sound effects. Again, just these little pieces that M will use in his songs to help them feel more realistic, more atmospheric. Really helps. The final verse with M actually writing back to Stan, too late. How the song goes. But yeah, this really does work well as just a showcase for just how well constructed M songs can be, the great stories that he can tell, the great lyrics that he can have, and the emotional weight that he can place into his performances, into his lyrics. Just an absolute classic track. Who Knew? Another one is kind of like satirical looks at how about his fame and his audience. A song which was initially, I think, made as a lead single. Obviously, that wouldn't end up being the case, but I can see how this would work as an introductory track to Eminem. We follow up with the first Steve Berman skits, leading into The Way I Am, another really strong track produced by M himself. I mean, I'm sure there was, he had help in terms of like creating and making the track and things, but the beat, like a lot of the songs on here, is very minimal anyway, so it's quite easy. I can see it being easy for M to create it, and again, just works really well as a kind of not very obvious flow, but M manages to ride it so well, and his lyrics, which largely have a very multi-syllable flow throughout it, almost like an iambic pentameter as well with his delivery of the in terms of like the stressed and unstressed syllables in between his flow. Yeah, and his voice just sounds just so angry and so frustrated throughout as well, which really helps create the feeling for it. Follows up with the actual lead single, Real Slim Shady. In terms of production, this is kind of like the opposite of a lot of the tracks on the album. It's not as minimal as a lot of the other production is. Dre brings in a lot of not throughout the song necessarily, but it's like the beat is a lot more layered, and certainly for the chorus there's a lot more instrumentation brought in, and just in terms of like the instrumentation itself, this is clearly a song that Dre made for Eminem. I mean, I'm trying to think of some of the other major artists that Dre produced for, trying to hear them over a song like this, which is so poppy but still has quite a strong hip hop feel to it. It would have been interesting to see anyone else try and do a track like this that Dre worked with, but I mean, Real Slim Shady, just again one of those celebrity baiting, just looking at Eminem, a real strong introduction track for anyone who missed out on the Slim Shady LP. One of his biggest singles overall, strong catchy chorus, which M was really good for at this kind of time. A really strong lead single. Follow this with Remember Me, featuring Sticky Fingers and RBX. Sticky Fingers has a really strong verse with M on here. He manages to match the kind of like demented horrorcore nature of the track. RBX is a really interesting addition to the track. I've never quite understood how he made the cut. I mean, the nature of Eminem being established with some older artists for this track, which again, Sticky Fingers really makes sense because his style is very similar to Eminem's, particularly on this song. RBX just really does not have anything that matches the pair of them. Like, he was never a great lyricist to begin with, and just his stuff on here just really feels out of place. I'm sure there could have been other people who made it. Nothing really. I don't want to sound too much like I'm completely shitting on RBX, but it always just felt like such a weird addition to this track. But anyway, the song itself, once you get past RBX's part, it's really strong. Into I'm Back, another lyric-led look at M in the public spotlight. The more kind of personal Marshall Mathers features after this, with a more of a guitar driven beats, kind of going into a bit more of the kind of rock influence that would come crop up in later albums. Yeah, with this being more of the M and Jeff Bass style production. Um, and yeah, there are some lyrics on here which are a bit difficult to take, but in terms of M's anger throughout the track, particularly the opening bars, the building up of the beat and his voice before it really gets into the strong rest of the song is just so beautifully done. Um, a Ken Kniff skits to follow up. Yeah. Drug ballads. Another of the Diana Ray collaborations. Very similar to Come On Everybody, but this is more of a drug bass track, hence the title. So a bit of an opening insight. I get into some of the drug stuff that M would go on to later, or had been exploring a little bit at this time, but not necessarily on the album so much. But yeah, it's a strong kind of party track. M's got some great lines throughout it, some great lyrics, some really great descriptive lines about drugs and the effects of drugs. There's a kind of eerily ironic lines later on toward about how about how his drug use and drink use would affect him. But hey, hindsight. Amityville featuring Bizarre from D12. Another quite hardcore style track with some very very harrowing lines from the pair of them, trying to out repulse each other. As that kind of style of track, it's fine. It works. We've had by this time in the album, obviously we've had quite a lot of it, so taking it all through at once can be a bit tricky. Bitch Please Part 2 featuring Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Exhibit and Nate Dogg. A cool posse cut between the group with Dre bringing in some of his strongest collaborators at that time to help with Eminem, and as a way of establishing M as a major hip hop artist, to have Snoop Dogg and Exhibit on trading bars with him and Dre, really helps. Even the song itself isn't too much in terms of. I mean, M does have a bit about his relationship with the media and the outside world and the public and that kind of thing. Dre has a bit as well, in terms of the contemporary references to the Limp Bizkit concerts controversy. And Nate Dogg's chorus is a strong, catchy Nate Dogg chorus again. We then go into Kim, which on the clean edition is replaced with the South Park inspired The Kids, which in itself is a really fun track. Again, looking at the effects of drugs and just M's lyricism and description throughout is really cool on there. But on the actual edition of the album, we have Kim, which it's kind of like the lead in to the Bonnie and Clyde track. So actually describes the argument between himself and Kim leading up to the murder. So again, in terms of like the actual thinking about this being, when you consider their actual relationship with each other, the struggles that Kim has gone through mentally, perhaps this isn't the best representation of M in terms of the stuff that he can make about people and the effects it can actually have on people. In terms of a performance, though, it is a really powerful song. I mean, M just sounds absolutely at the like he's going to lose his voice. He's screeching so much throughout it, going back and forth between himself and Kim. Um, it does kind of help that M's Kim voice sounds like Eddie from Ed and Eddie. Um, so yeah, in terms of an actual vocal performance, in terms of a storytelling track, and so actual the beats with its Led Zeppelin drums throughout it, and the atmospheric outro. It is a really strong song. Was it necessary for the album? Perhaps not. Is it a bit difficult to take with in terms of the lyrics and in terms of the actual people involved in it? Yeah, it can be. It can be. It's certainly not. If if you're not feeling great about things anyway, it's probably not a great song to listen to. But I mean, this is kind of like the main thing to take away from the album for me is it just in terms of like maturing with Eminem. At the time that this album came out, certainly when I was listening to it, being 13, 14, and angry with the world and everyone, this was the perfect album to sort of get through and help get through the feelings that you had about people, and perhaps inflated some of those feelings, and listening through this album. But yeah, obviously now being a lot older, this album being 22 years old now, as a lot of this I obviously don't relate to anymore. A lot of it I do kind of feel uncomfortable going through. Again, it's only the fact that I know what to expect from it, and I know that this is just what M was doing at the time. Controversy for the sake of controversy, but there's still that part of you which the angry teenager which really did attach themselves to these lyrics, which makes it easier to take as an art form. But yeah, certainly songs like him aren't very easy to listen to these days, and it's only the fact that I can separate it as a performance piece that allows me to get through it. Really, we follow on the album with Under the Influence with D12, sort of the introduction to D12 to this audience. They all have some great lines on here. It's a great way of establishing all of them as individuals. We then finish with Criminal. Again, another a crazy way for M to finish the album, featuring some of the strongest homophobic lyrics on here. Again, there are certainly clever bits interweaving within the very controversial lyrics throughout the album, and there's an amusing skit towards the end of it as well. Certainly, if you want to introduce someone who's unfamiliar with Eminem or doesn't like the violence and misogyny and homophobia of Eminem, this is not a song to play for them. But as a closer, I mean, it's just a typical kind of Eminem closer, really. Not necessarily a strong track itself, but as his way of wanting to make sure we don't get a happy ending to finish off, then fine. Yeah, and this version has it does have the kids on here, as well as a remix of The Way I Am with Marilyn Manson on it, considering works being involved with the video and being mentioned in the lyrics as well, of an artist who with similar levels of controversy around that time, not for the same controversies he's facing at the moment, But as a collaboration between the two, it's a really strong and it's a strong companion to the original Where I Am, which is such a strong track in itself. But yeah, a very strong classic album, if a bit difficult to take at times, which is why it's not the strongest overall Eminem album. Um, but I say the really strong songs on here do outweigh the songs on Slim Shady LP. So even though those two are very tight together in terms of like my feelings towards them, Marshall Mathers LP still just kind of pips it just because of it, in terms of like the impact some of these songs really had, and in terms of just the mixture of the minimalist production that Dre and M and the Bass Brothers provide. Yeah, it's a very strong emotional album overall. But number one, I go for the Eminem Show. So the third in the initial trilogy of revered classic Eminem albums, and this one does just take it for me. It doesn't have as much of the controversial lyrics as Marshall Mathers LP had, so it's easier in that sense to get through. The content is a bit more personal throughout it, and just the production itself. M taking more of a lead role with production, and with Jeff Bass and Louis Resto being involved as well. Just the production is just taken to a whole new level on the album instrumentally. This is where we get a lot more of the like rock influence style for M. Not to say that again the album is necessarily rock influenced, but there's a lot of that throughout the album. We do obviously have tracks that are more hip hop based. Dre produces a few tracks which have that more traditional Dre style throughout it, but yeah, certainly instrumentally, this album is really, really heavy. We begin with the track "White America," looking at M's relationship as a white artist to hip hop and being accepted by hip hop fans and America generally. Which is a really strong opener. Business produced by Dr. Dre. A nice bouncy Dre beat for M to rhyme over. Clean Out My Closet follows this, discussing his relationship with his mother. M has since gone on to say how much he regrets this song and doesn't listen to it anymore, which I can understand if your feelings towards your mother have changed so drastically since this track. But still, as a song, it's really well made, and M's lyrics are very powerful throughout it. The chorus sounds really good, so I wouldn't be too ashamed of making this song because it is a classic. Square Dance, another political kind of take on things, looking not entirely at politics, but certainly that influence in there, looking at the world post 9/11, and just himself as a lyricist. He has some great lyrics throughout. The beat is a lot kind of more worldly, I suppose, in terms of the actual instrumentation and production, which gives it a different setting, more of a like European kind of feel, particularly for the intro. And M's outro, doing voices of different hip hop artists. The impression of Dr. Dre, Exhibit, Busta Rhymes is always amusing. But strong track lyrically. The Kiss skit, which leads into Soldier. looking at the situation where he found where he found Kim with a bouncer and attacked him. Um, in terms of a very sort of strong, rapid fire, uh, you know, powerful track. Soldier really does that. Looking at the effects that these situations have on him, leading in then to Say Goodbye Hollywood, a more cinematic kind of feeling track. Again, what the issues with this situation, and just man, just the effects that fame has kind of taken on him and his daughter. Wanting his initial wanting to hide her from that, but becoming so ingrained with public life. It's really really strong track. Drips, the collaboration with Obi Trice, is kind of seen as the weaker track of the album, and yeah, it is, but even if it is the weakest overall song on the album, is as a way of introducing Obi Trice to people, it's fine, and there are some funny lines on there throughout. So it's not an all bad song. It's better than Rap God. Fight me. Then we have Without Me, the lead single following this, with the Obi Trice at the beginning. Again, kind of building on the established lead singles material we had at this kind of time from M. Very amusing, but quite instrumentally heavy in terms of like the in terms of the sounds you hear throughout the track. It's probably the stronger of that kind of trifecta of lead singles. My Name Is Wilson Shady, Without Me. This is kind of like the best put together track. Maybe because there's a bit more that M had to work with in terms of lyrics, in terms of how mainstream audiences felt about him around that time, and how how necessary he is to music. Yeah, and obviously, the video is a classic as well. I mean, who 8 months after 9/11 would dress up as Bin Laden and dance in a video? I mean, it's classic. But yeah, so then after that, and some Paul Rosenberg, we have Sing for the Moment, very strong anthemic track about M's relationship with his audience, and his the perception of him being someone who invokes violence for audiences, but not actually being the case. Just in terms of like a young person relating to Eminem's lyrics and material, this is like kind of like the pinnacle of that. So you can really picture yourself being that person that he describes in the opening verse. Even if you don't quite live that lifestyle, you can certainly really feel that whilst listening to it. And with the Aerosmith sample really really banging throughout it. It's the extended outro with the guitar going through. It's a really really classic track. Superman has a bit more of a kind of dreamlike quality to it, and has Eminem, another a woman's song, but there's some great lines throughout it, and it gives some pretty good rhyme schemes. Even though M is kind of being looking at how how women perceive him, the issues they can have in relationships with women, having gone from his relationship with Kim into new relationships. he can was be a little bit mean throughout it. It doesn't feel like he's trying to take himself too seriously though throughout the song. The whole Superman metaphor that comes throughout doesn't feel like it's supposed to be taken too seriously. It's just more kind of a thing that's there. But yeah, it's in terms of like the production of the track, it's certainly quite different to a lot of the other stuff that we get on this album and just in for M tracks generally. So yeah, for production alone, it's a very strong track. Haley's song, talking about his daughter, his feelings towards his daughter, and the issues that he's had with Kim, how that won't affect his relationship with his daughter. M singing throughout the kind of the first two verses help bring that emotional weight. Even though he goes on about how he can't sing, he does sound good on this track. When he does sing in this kind of style, yes, he's not the strongest vocalist, but he can hit his own sort of style with this and sound fine. It's certainly very listenable. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about that. In terms of M's vocals, it sounds fine, and yes, say the content is good as well. Steve Berman skits, another classic. Followed with When the Music Stops, collaboration with D12. Another great set of bars between the group of them, just following on from each other and kind of looking at fame in their own ways. Bizarre's references to different musical artists and the kind of a comedic take on the influence they've had on him works really well. We get Say What You Say with Dr. Dre. Having the two of them go back and forth, their chemistry is really well established on here, and it's a very strong, bouncy, if kind of darker Dre beat. They say both sound good together as a kind of a bit of a retaliation towards Jermaine Dupri. It kind of works. Timberland turns up at the end to help with this. So there's a nice, interesting feature, the cameo there. Till I Collapse, featuring Nate Dogg. A very, another really anthemic, hard-hitting track with some of M's most passionate, hard-hitting lyrics throughout. Nate Dogg sounds really great on the chorus as well. I mean, obviously, if you hear the song enough in adverts or video games or whatever, but it really is a very strong track. In terms of lyrics and overall song, it's so strong as a way of helping close out the album, bring it to that height to close off. Obviously, the actual closer, My Dad's Gone Crazy. Again, we need a bit more of a lighter track, or at least not so serious and emotional track to end off with. But in terms of M and Haley on the chorus, always sounds great. With those, the two of them have some great back and forth throughout the song. The Dre beat is a nice bouncy Dre song, which becomes more atmospheric and towards the end for the final verse, which really helps heighten M's lyrics. He starts to get more serious throughout for the third verse, which is a really strong way to. So it does kind of end in a strong, serious way, in comparison to a lot of the other outro songs that we get, which is cool. Finish off with the Ken Kniff skits. to close out, which is nice. As just actually as we recorded this, we just had the 20th anniversary of this be released, which was interesting. We do have a kind of like a almost album's worth of bonus material, largely instrumentals from the album, like select tracks, like the singles and some other like strong songs for it. Some of the instrumentals are slightly longer than the actual tracks on here, which is interesting. I don't know if that's because that's how they were initially meant to be, and they were cut down so that everything could fit on here well. But like particularly, "Sing for the Moment," "Clean Out My Closet," um, Superman. I think they all have like quite slightly lengthier outros than they have on the actual album, which would have been interesting to hear how they would have gone like that. Even if it would have made the album even longer. Um, we also have "Stimulate," a track which was going to be on the album, I think, or certainly recorded around that kind of time, but ended up as like bonus material around this kind of time. The Conspiracy Freestyle and Bump Heads with G Unit, which again were kind of just after Eminem show, but were released as B-side material around this kind of time. And it's nice for these tracks to kind of like have homes in a way on an official album. Um, Jimmy, Brian, and Mike, I think the track is called, which feels like it's more Slim Shady LP era than Eminem shows. I'm not quite sure how it fits as bonus material on here, but okay. And a couple of live performance freestyles with Royce the 5'9" as a hype man, and with Proof as a hype man later for some for Real Slim Shady and The Way I Am in Japan, apparently, which as bonus material is fine. It's cool to just remind of how well Proof worked as a hype man for M. Because just because we got for the Slim Shady LP, we did have an extended version as well, which had some different editions of Guilty Conscious, which I just wanted to bring up as well, because we actually got the radio chorus for some of these versions as well, which kind of works better, I feel, than the actual version of the song we get, which is just the narration on its own. Which, don't get me wrong, as a concept works fine, but it's always the chorus that they added for the radio edition works really well, and it works with the narration playing with it as well. It's a bit of a shame they didn't actually have that version on the album, and the version that they use for the bonus album is the chorus has been altered slightly. I don't know if they weren't able to get the rights properly for it or something like that, but just that little niggle aside. Also, Bad Guys Always Die with Dr. Dre from the Wild Wild West soundtrack. A great collaboration between the pair of them again. And I think there's a few of the other kind of bonus bar tracks that are released around this kind of time. I think Get You Mad, I think, might be on there, which is some great bars on it. But again, as a way of getting these tracks as bonus material for an official album, it's cool to hear. We didn't seem to get any of that for the Marshall Mathers. I don't remember there being any bonus material released for the Marshall Mathers LP. Maybe there wasn't anything that fits that were from that time which still fits or anything like that. But just to go back, in terms of that classic trifecta of albums, Slim Shady LP, Marshall Mathers LP, and Eminem Show, really strong group of albums. Eminem Show is still the strongest overall. Just in terms of the structure of the album, the sequencing of it, how the songs worked in kind of succession together with the break with the skits. The skit kind of like breaking the album up roughly evenly in terms of like the chapters of the album. I was always really enjoyed. Love the production. The lyrics are really, you can really feel the lyrics so strongly throughout a lot of the tracks, and yeah, it's just an amazing album overall. One of the strongest hip hop albums, one of the strongest albums ever made. That's how strong Eminem Show is. 20th anniversary today, so it still holds up really high, particularly next to the rest of the discography. But yeah, that's Eminem discography uncovered. Um, there's a lot to take in, as with it being Eminem. Um, yeah, hopefully future ones won't be so much to divulge into, but yeah, we'll certainly have to see when we get there. This has been me looking at Eminem's albums forever.